Hey everyone, it's the Outlaw John Rocha here with my spoiler review for Elvis, this brand new film that's out now in theaters from Baz Luhrmann. I gave you guys the weekend to go out and see it. It was #1 at the box office at over $31 million, just edging out Top Gun Maverick. And by the way, I did say last week that I thought Jurassic World Dominion was going to crater. Top Gun Maverick was going to go to the top, but I was hoping Elvis would be #1, but I wasn't sure. You know, it's been a long time since Elvis has walked the earth, but knowing so many people are Baz Luhrmann fans and Elvis Presley fans, I was hoping people would come out, and sure enough, they did. So #1 at the box office, and now it's time to do a spoiler review for this film, and I've been looking forward to doing this one since I saw the movie. Some of you have seen my out of theater reaction, and you loved it, so I appreciate that. A lot of great comments on there, but let's dive in deeper into this movie. And before I do, just want to remind you all to please subscribe to the channel down below, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button. So you see when we're dropping all the content we're doing here on the Outlaw Nation channel. Head on over to Twitch, follow me there, the Outlaw Nation, all one word on Twitch, and Patreon, patreon.com/John Rocha. It's a hot one today, so you'll excuse me if I'm a hunk of burning love here with the heat going on in San Diego. All right, this one comes to us from Baz Luhrmann. You know, I've seen and enjoyed a majority of his movies since Strictly Ballroom, into Romeo and Juliet, Moulin Rouge. I didn't think Nicole Kidman was the right choice for that character, but overall, the film is visually fantastic. Australia, kind of half and half on that one. The Great Gatsby, some of it worked, some of it didn't. Certainly one of the most unique filmmakers we have working today, an Australian filmmaker working in the mainstream of the world. That's a rarity, to be honest with you. So Baz Luhrmann's name still carries anticipation, still carries expectation, and he's been working on this one since 2014. 2014, ladies and gentlemen, that is a long time to be gestating this one. They started shooting in 2019, and remember, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson both got COVID, so kind of delayed the production. And originally, Maggie Gyllenhaal was going to play Gladys Presley, the mom of Elvis Presley. I think Sam Worthington was supposed to play Vern as well, but didn't quite work out in the end. So they went ahead and replaced those actors, and I'll tell you who they replaced them with in just a second, and went ahead forward and finished. And this one screened at a number of festivals, got a nice buzz going for it. So I was looking forward to it when I went to go see it at a screening, and I had a blast. Right off the bat, let me tell you something. I absolutely loved the film. Loved the film. As a massive Elvis Presley fan, I was hoping to get something that was representative of why this guy is so beloved by so many generations of people, why his music still resonates, why people still sing it, why people still love it, and also if the movie was able to capture the tragedy of Elvis Presley as well. You know, starting out as this rebellious icon with rock and roll, shaking his hips, making the ladies go crazy, the young girls go crazy, angering the more conservative elements in our country, going into the military, you know, trying to be domesticated in essence, coming back out. By the time he's out, the Beatles are huge, the British invasion is huge. So he's got to reclaim his throne as the king of rock and roll, does the 1968 comeback special, and then boom, goes into Vegas. And that's where we start the descent, the slow descent of Elvis Presley up until his death from cardiac arrest at 42 years old. Only 42 years old. Some of you watching me right now are either just past that or approaching it. And I bet it's kind of crazy to think about Elvis Presley dying at 42 years old in 1977. So I wasn't sure if this film was going to capture all that, and it did. It did so well. Now, does it skirt past a couple of the more troublesome aspects of Elvis Presley's life? Absolutely, and we'll address that later on. But overall, I think the film nails it in really capturing the legend of Elvis Presley. As I said, why he resonates, what it is about his character, what it is about his beginnings, what it is about his zenith as the highest paid performer in Hollywood, as a guy churning out hit after hit after hit after hit, even when he's stuck in those not so good Elvis Presley movies, for the most part, not so good. He's still churning out memorable music. There's a lot of songs from those Elvis Presley movies that I like. There are some that are not so good. As you remember the old Eddie Murphy bit, we was talking about Elvis singing his dialogue for everything. We got to win this race, you know, all that kind of stuff. But overall, there was some great music still going on. And then becoming an older man, losing Priscilla Presley, her taking Lisa Marie, how that affects him, being tied to Tom Parker, going into this pill addiction. All of it is here to explore, and I really love that the film does that. It's not a straightforward biopic. It's very stylized, and what would you expect from Baz Luhrmann? And it's told through the eyes of Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks. We'll get to the performances in just a second. And I thought that was a brilliant way to do it. He gets to use his tactics that Baz Luhrmann likes to do, you know, superimposing images on top of each other, moving quickly through images, scenes, and what have you, and moving and just pulsating the rhythm throughout the movie and moving fast through the movie. This is a 2-hour and 40-minute film, yet somehow it does not feel like 2 hours and 40 minutes because there's so much to distract you, so much to grab your attention, so much to enjoy here overall. And I think the film absolutely nailed it. Yeah, as Scott Mann said in his tweet, if you're looking for a straightforward biopic, this is not necessarily the one for you. But if you're looking for a biopic that approaches Elvis Presley's life with a little more of a stylized approach, then this one is for you, and it works really well. And there are some straightforward biopic scenes or extended periods in the film for sure, but overall, this one has a little bit of flair to it, especially because we're seeing it through the eyes of Colonel Tom Parker, who's older now and looking back. You guys remember the opening is him like walking by himself in this kind of hazy daze, multiple images of himself, the camera being kind of off kilter and hazy, as I said, and he's holding his medical stuff, and he's walking around, and he's in the casinos, and he's seeing all these things. And that's what kind of gives us an idea of the kind of person who is going to be telling us this story. He's not necessarily an unreliable narrator, but he's certainly a narrator with an agenda and with a purpose, and that certainly comes through. Let's get to the performances here. Austin Butler is incredible as Elvis Presley. My God, Austin Butler. I mean, what a star-making performance. He's electric. He's vibrant. He's tender when he needs to be with his mom, yet he is a sexual dynamo on stage. I mean, I love that scene near the beginning of the movie when he's up on stage for the first time that we're seeing him with that pink suit, and he's got those moves, and the women start screaming. He looks back to the guys there, and he's like, hey, man, why are they screaming? It's like, because you'll wiggle, man. Do some more wiggling. And then you see Tom Parker narrating what is happening. I've never quite seen it that way, where someone else is narrating step by step what is happening to these women as they're seeing Elvis Presley. Now, look, Frank Sinatra came before Elvis, but Sinatra didn't do the wiggle. Sinatra was the voice. You know, he was a skinny kid. The microphone stand, he was barely wider than the microphone stand, but the girls went crazy for him. The Bobby Soxers, right? Well, here comes Elvis Presley, and it's a completely different thing. His sexual energy is out there. It's more animalistic, more rough. And certainly we see that coming through in that opening scene. Even Sam Phillips's assistant lets out this yelp, which encapsulates what all these women are doing in that time. And so we see that. But we also see, as I said, his tenderness with his mom, his forgiveness with his father, even though there are times he wants to rage at his dad, he doesn't do so because he's a Southern boy. He's got charm. He's got respect. He loves his parents. When we see him with Priscilla the first time, he is awkward. He is shy. Even though he's 24, she's 14, he feels like he's regressing a little bit to being a teenager. Now, some of you might be uncomfortable with that. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the review, but certainly those moments there, Austin Butler captures them so well. And then when we see him grow into his power as Elvis Presley, Austin Butler really brings it when he's going off on the Memphis Mafia, when they're on their little like a mini kingdom there on the studio set, doing their thing. You know, nobody messes with Elvis. When he's waiting on the Hollywood side for those two producers to come and pitch him the 1968 comeback special, he is in command of his world, even as his world is crumbling and falling apart. He is in command of it. And then when we see him in the last desperate attempts to break free from Colonel Tom Parker, firing him, yelling at him, and then seeing he's got to be beholden to this guy because this guy's been doing some nefarious tricks behind his back, and serves him with a bill that'll essentially make Elvis Presley broke and destitute. And we see the absolute inner destruction in him as his last moment of defiance goes by, and he finds himself tied to Tom Parker, essentially going off a cliff with him. And it's so heartbreaking. And Austin Butler takes us from that young man all the way to the end here, and he does an incredible performance. I mean, I liken it to what we saw from, I can't remember the actor's name, but in Excalibur, seeing that King Arthur from like a squire all the way to the end there when he dies with battling Mordred. And Orson Welles, of course, with Citizen Kane. It's the rare actor that can take a character from a young man or a young person and all the way to the end and make it believable. And certainly Austin Butler deserves an incredible amount of credit for that. Tom Hanks also is fantastic in the film. I know we got crap for the accent. We got crap for some of the prosthetics and all this stuff. It's an unusual performance. But ladies and gentlemen, This is a two-time Oscar winner. And there's a reason he's a two-time Oscar winner, because he's damn good at acting. And I think once you get past the first few minutes with his high-pitched lilt and his moving with his accent, and once you accept the accent that he's delivering, it's the character that comes through. It's that character that kind of gets your attention and makes you feel a connection to him, because he's a bit of an imp. He's got a devilish charm, and he never lies to you. He tells you he's a carny. He tells you he learned how to trick the audience and trick the paying customer there when he was working for these carnivals and doing the things that he's doing. And we see him there with Hank Snow, and we see him there with Hank Snow's son, played awesomely by Cody Smith-McPhee. And we see him doing all these things and then nefariously moving into position to take Elvis. And when he takes Elvis, taking him into the stratosphere, you know, there's that ride on the Ferris wheel where he's having this conversation when he's pitching himself to Elvis. And we see Elvis now start to speak his dreams out there, visualize what he really wants to be, the top of the mountain there as a performer and as a rock and roll artist. And then we see a little bit of the tenderness when he's coming in, even though we know he's manipulating his way to be, in essence, Elvis's replacement for Gladys. We do see a little bit of that uncomfortable awkwardness with emotion when Elvis is so destitute and crying, emotionally destitute and crying over the loss of his mom. Again, another shout out to Austin Butler, who plays that scene so well. You sense the pain and the destruction within Elvis, and he reaches for Tom and he grabs for Tom. And Hanks plays this so well because he's kind of unsettled by it, but also realizing this is the way in to kind of manipulate this guy. And the guy served himself up so honestly to him, and it's a shame that Tom Parker didn't have a better moral compass to understand what to do with this man. And we see that throughout as he's having these battles with Elvis. He rarely raises his voice. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room. He knows how to finagle these situations. We see that, and Tom Hanks does a wonderful job with this role all the way to the end, where he's essentially an old man playing out his days and talking his stories that no one's really listening to. I think he does a fantastic job. Olivia de Jong does a great job as well as Priscilla Presley with the limited time that she has here in the film. I think she does a great job conveying the chemistry between her and Elvis and the genuine love she had for Elvis in the scenes that they have together, until that scene at the airport where they're kind of handing off Lisa Marie and they're having that conversation, and she sees that Elvis is descending into the bad place. There's such love and care and genuine affection. Also, shout out to Helen Thompson, who plays Gladys Presley. She replaced Maggie Gyllenhaal. I thought Helen does a great job in really kind of bringing to life Gladys Presley, having those connections with Elvis. We have those moments with her and Elvis where she's afraid that things are going to get in the way between them, that they're almost that she's going to lose him, and the affection at times borders on a little bit of that Hamlet Gertrude thing. How deep is this affection? It's just on the edges. It's a genuine love there for each other, but it's very codependent because of what you find out about his twin brother dying at birth, and that he's got essentially, he's got to carry the weight of the twin brother and doing what's best for the family and what have you. And I think Richard Roxburgh, it's great to see him in another Baz Luhrmann film. Remember, he was the villain in Moulin Rouge. He does a great job as Vernon, Elvis's dad, who was clearly not made for this business and was easily duped throughout this business. Just wasn't a man of incredible intelligence, and unfortunately got used in a number of occasions. In the occasional moments we see him, Richard Roxburgh does a great job of playing the kind of submissive role here to Colonel Tom Parker, Tom Hanks' Colonel Tom Parker in those moments. And even with Elvis, when he feels, just heartbroken that he wasn't a better business manager when they get the bill from Colonel Tom Parker for that $8 million. He is just so destroyed that he couldn't help his son more, that he couldn't be a better person for his son. And even his reaction when Gladys dies, his crying on the steps in front of the press, that's some great acting for sure. We see Yola in here playing Sister Rosetta Thorpe. Those are some great actors to spot. Kelvin Harrison Jr. in here as B.B. King. Some nice moments from him and B.B. King, and certainly some conversations about white versus black in the rock and roll world, and we will get to that. Cody Smith-McPhee, as I said here, as Jimmy Rogers Snow. Doc Ray Montgomery, for you Stranger Things fans, in here as Steve Binder, and he's almost unrecognizable as Steve Binder. It took me a while to realize who that was. And even David Wenham is in here, for those of you who are 300 fans, another Australian actor in this film. He plays Hank Snow. He does it so well, too. Really good, believable Hank Snow, who is second choice to Elvis as Elvis's fame grows on his own tour. And those are great opening scenes to see for sure. Let's move on to the direction here. I think Baz Luhrmann does a wonderful job directing this film. He brings all his instincts, his stylized instincts to bear here, and it is fun to watch. I mean, he looks like he is having the time of his life directing this movie. He's got a lot of respect for the subject and the material involved with the subject, that being Elvis Presley, and his life and what's going on in the world and his point of view. And he said this at CinemaCon when I was there, when he was telling us about the movie. He said the movie is also commentary on how America was changing from the 50s, 60s into the 70s. And certainly we see that in Elvis Presley's life when he experiences the death of John Kennedy in the middle of a show or right around a show, and in the death of Martin Luther King Jr. as he's preparing for the 1968 comeback special, how that affects him for sure. And all these things that are happening throughout, and the way he moves the camera, the way he brings you in. Like when we go back to when Elvis Presley's a kid and he's wearing his Captain Marvel Shazam lightning bolt with that DCB that influences the TCB saying that he's going to have later on in life. We see him as a young kid. You know, we find out that he is, he's having to live with Black people in those neighborhoods because his father passed a bad check, went to jail, and they don't have enough money to live in the white neighborhoods. We see him running into the churches. We see him being caught up in the rhythm of the church. All of that, for me, works so well. And we see that juxtaposed with how he hears the blues being played in the shacks from people who are not in the church. You see the combo there, and that is Elvis Presley. He is a man who loved and appreciated religion and gospel and soul, but also he's a man who was capable of inducing sexual explosions of pleasure from women who are just watching him on the stage. So it's great to see all of that. And then we see how he takes us into the different stages of Elvis's life. We don't linger too long on certain things and we move past them quickly. But then when we get to certain long stretches of the periods of his life, we really dig in our heels, and he lets us feel comfortable with that time before we move on to the next extended period of time in his life. And I think he does a great job. It's visually fantastic, gorgeous to look at, vibrant as hell, colorful as hell. Love the costumes, love the look overall of what they do to convey the time periods. I think the actual attention to the little elements in those time periods are really great to see, and they help you believe those time periods. For some of us that lived through the 70s, I think he captures the 70s really well when we get to that section of the movie. So overall, his direction is fantastic. Gets some great performances from all the actors. Love where he places the camera. Love how he moves us through the film. And of course, credit to the editors and credit to the cinematographers as well for getting us into the mood of these separate these moments in Elvis's life, these periods, these eras in Elvis's life and how they changed. And I think he does have a very strong point of view of essentially saying that Colonel Tom Parker is the more nefarious, sneaky, self-serving aspects of our existence. You know, Elvis is essentially America. To me, it seems like Elvis is America, this young kid who's got this power but doesn't know what to do with it, or how to use it for good, or how to use it for himself. And this nefarious thing comes along to kind of twist him and use him and all these kinds of things. And I think that's a basic theme that's running throughout the movie, that Elvis is being used up like America was used up. Elvis is being twisted like America was being twisted. Elvis is made to be afraid of foreigners like America has made to be afraid of foreigners. Elvis becomes obsessed with guns like America is currently obsessed with guns, or has always been obsessed with guns. All these things come out here, and there's a symbolism running throughout the movie about that, about a person who has his own limitations and hides his limitations in order to manipulate this thing and turn it into, in essence, a vision of himself. And even when America wants to break out, that's Elvis Presley wants to break out that 1968 special and sing that song, If I Can Dream, which is against Tom Parker's wishes. It's a moment of defiance. It's a moment of wanting to change the world. And this other nefarious part's like, no, we can't have you using this platform to bring people together. We need the division. We need people to see you as a certain thing. So I think there's a lot of symbolism here that you can find as you're watching this movie, with if Elvis is representing America and Tom Parker is representing the more self-serving, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, the self-serving, selfish parts of this country, this country's history, whether it be the media or politicians or the machine itself, the governmental machine itself, it is trying to twist and manipulate this person who wants to believe in the best of America. And we're seeing him being twisted in that way. And I think that works so well. And I got to give a credit to the screenwriters as well. It is Baz Luhrmann, also Sam Brummel, Craig Pierce, and Jeremy Donner all do a fantastic job. Now let's deal with some of the aspects of some of you've been talking about here. I've seen it online. I've seen it in other articles. People who all of a sudden have become Elvis Presley aficionados and experts, which I had no idea there were so many Elvis Presley experts amongst our critics. But I've seen these complaints about how they kind of walk over the idea of him possibly stealing black music. And I understand that. There's been an element of that. There's been a belief in that. But in 1957, a Jet reporter went on the set of Jailhouse Rock and asked Elvis about these quotes that were attributed to him. And just to give you some full history here, there was a quote that's gone around for legend where he said supposedly that a black person or a black woman, all they can do is shine his shoes. And he disputed that he never said it. He never said it. And he says, like, he's always found a way to try to bring black musicians into his work, to try to bring black musicians, give them, put them on the stage and have them be a part of his band, have them be a part of his choir. We see it in the 1970s, certainly when he's on stage, we see those sisters who sing with him. We see him being influenced as a young man by black music. We see him being influenced by gospel, by soul, by blues, by rock and roll, or the early versions of rock and roll there being played. And so some people claim that he stole the music, but I just have never believed that. He takes the music, he's influenced by the music, and he does what he does with it. And I think B.B. King is the one who calls him out when he says, hey, man, as a white boy, they're not going to arrest you. They'll arrest me. So yes, Elvis benefited from white privilege. From that, I will not counter you in any way, shape, or form. But I also think he was influenced by black music. And look, we see Eminem is influenced by rap. We see white artists. We see white basketball players. We see white people in general that are influenced by black communities because they spent time in black communities. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, some of you who are black will disagree with me, and I totally respect that. I'm only coming at from my point of view. So I absolutely create space for black people to have a different point of view on this. But I think the film tackles it well to show you that he's influenced by this. If you can show me evidence that Elvis purposely went in there and nefariously stole black people's music and took their songs without their permission and whatever, great, show me that. That's fine. I'll believe, give me the evidence of that. I will take a look at it. But from all the research I've seen, there's no evidence of him absolutely taking the music. There's evidence of him using the music. There's evidence of him covering the music. But this is not Pat Boone covering that stuff. This is Elvis Presley covering that stuff. It's a different point of view. Do you know what I'm saying? Pat Boone brought the nonsense. Elvis Presley brought the ferocity and brought out the best of that music. I think there's a difference. He didn't homogenize it, in my opinion. But again, you can feel differently about it if you feel. I absolutely understand that. The other thing in this is, of course, the Priscilla Presley situation. Now, this is much more difficult to kind of navigate and talk about, but I'm going to take a chance and do that. Obviously, a 24-year-old should not be courting a 14-year-old. That is not done in our world, right? But certainly back in the 1950s, 1960s, this idea of a 24-year-old man wooing a 14-year-old. Remember, this was on a military base in Germany. Her parents knew about it, had no issue with it. They legitimately fell in love. They legitimately were married. They had children, and Priscilla loved him up until the day she died. And she never once said she was groomed or felt manipulated by Elvis. She knew what she wanted. She fell in love with him, and she was always in love with him. Now, he treated her badly. Yes, he cheated on her, used drugs, did all these terrible things in terms of kind of abusing her love for him. Absolutely. For that, I will absolutely be in your camp of that. But this other thing, I mean, I don't know, it's really a tough thing to talk about, because if she was okay with it, she knew her mind at 14 years old and has stayed that, and understood herself all the way through and knew who she was, then, in almost all cases, yes, but maybe in this case, it's a little bit of an exception. And this isn't like the Jerry Lee Lewis situation. This is something completely different, because that was actually his blood. This is someone who he knew through other people. They met. He apparently was really respectful of her and courteous of her and flirted with her and took the time and was very respectful to her parents. And this was all done with her parents' permission. So all this is, I think it's just, and this wasn't Elvis when he was like Elvis. This was Elvis when he was Elvis. but not Elvis. And so it's a different time and a different situation in the South. We've seen that happen, and so all I can tell you is, for me, I understand people's issues with it, and I totally would not support it. Lord knows I hated it in Licorice Pizza. But in this situation, it worked out, and they genuinely had love for each other, and she loved him up until the day he died, and continues to, promote his image, be in charge of his image and his likeness and his foundations and all that stuff. Priscilla Presley does that out of love, for the genuine love she had for Elvis. So I understand the grooming aspects of it all. I understand people might have issues with it, and I certainly wouldn't stop you from having those issues. But on the other side, I would say the relationship worked out in the way that it did, and she never once felt that she was groomed, and no one has ever said that who spoke with her and talked with her that was legitimate or credible. So but again, I'll say, I understand if people have issues with that, because he does kind of gloss over the more uncomfortable aspects of Elvis Presley. And then when we see him sliding into the addiction, sliding into that, we don't spend too much time wallowing in that. It's seen more as a kind of indirect result of being beholden to Tom Parker. We don't see it as a more active approach. He's not active in his drug taking. He's not actively seeking out more drugs, and we don't see that necessarily. So it maintains the tragedy. So if some of you have an issue with that, I totally understand that. I did not go into this thinking, okay, tell me who Elvis Presley really is. I know who he is. I know what happened. This was about glorifying the legend of Elvis and showing you some of the more darker aspects of his career. So they did do that, but I understand if people feel they didn't go deep enough. Certainly the Nixon stuff, you could argue about as well. He was essentially a kind of a stooge for Nixon, and I get that. But by that time, he was doing the drugs, and he was kind of lost, and he lost Lisa Marie. He lost Priscilla and lost Lisa Marie. So there's all of that to consider. Now, some of the music, I really dug Austin Butler. He sang the early music stuff, which was great. And the way they weaved in the more modern music, I thought was great, was fantastic. The way they weaved that in, and better than they did in Great Gatsby. I wasn't a fan of how they used it in Great Gatsby. I think he was showing off a little bit there. And in this, it's a little more organic. It feels more natural. And maybe because, rap music samples other songs sometimes, and they do it really well. I was able to kind of go along with it and enjoy it and have fun with it. And I thought they did a nice job with that. And there's some really cool tracks in here that I think are great. Doja Cat has one, and apparently there was an Eminem Jay-Z one. I don't know if they actually did it or not. So I haven't looked at the soundtrack yet, but I thought Austin Butler, though, going back to the actual Elvis songs, he did a great job. He sings all the early stuff. When they get to the older Elvis, that's all the actual Elvis Presley singing. But the younger stuff, I think they did a great job with it. 3 moments I want to tell you about that I think really make the movie before I wrap up this spoiler review. Certainly the moment in the pink suit when he's discovering his power, when the women go crazy, and that one girl is like this, really experiencing something that she's never experienced before. And it comes out as this explosion of emotion and sex and what have you. I thought Baz Luhrmann did an excellent job directing that sequence. Connect that sequence up to that moment where Elvis is defying Colonel Tom Parker, defying the police before they send him in the military, and he goes to that outdoor concert, and those cops are on top of him, telling him what to do. Boy, does that feel familiar nowadays. And he comes out on that stage and he delivers a lion's roar of a performance. And the way Baz shoots that, the way the sound is kind of upped, I think the volume was upped to where you were feeling that in your ears and in your head and in your body. You were caught up with that. From one outlaw to another, I was connected to to Austin Butler performing as Elvis Presley in that scene, and I thought they did a great job. I also think they did a fantastic job with If I Can Dream. That is the show-stopping moment of the movie. That whole song, everything leading up to it. Yeah, did they mess around with the facts a little bit? Sure. It's a song that had been written before. It was not written overnight for him to perform it there. But the performance by Austin Butler there as Elvis Presley, it is incredible. The emotion, the power, the vulnerability that is showing, putting himself out there, essentially singing to his fellow man from this deep place that is the lover of gospel, the lover of God, the lover of religion, the lover of wanting people to come together. He is singing about that after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, see Mahalia Jackson telling him that he Elvis should sing something or come up with something, you know. So certainly a man who was tied in to the Black community, even though people might criticize where he got the music to start off his career, he still maintained his ties to the Black community and to the spokespeople for the Black community. And in that moment, we see that, and when he delivers that powerful version of If I Can Dream, I stopped, like, just sat back in my chair and I almost started crying because it was so well done and there was so much emotion coursing through it. And I think at the end there, when we see the singing of Unchained Melody, when we see them bring in the real Elvis Presley just at a place where he's near the end. And if the movie hadn't done an incredible job of building that journey up for you through his life, that moment wouldn't have hit you as hard as it does. And I think that scene, even though it's a scene that has been around since 1970, or a performance rather that's been around since 1970 something, that moment and that song and that performance works so well in the movie because we have fallen in love with Elvis. We've fallen in love with Austin Butler's performance. And we've seen the tragedy of him being tied to Tom Parker now, the tragedy that he can't travel the world, the tragedy that he's stuck in this contract because Tom Parker can't travel, doesn't have a passport, has a nefarious past that he doesn't want to get exposed. And he's manipulated Elvis in the situation. So when he's singing there, Unchained Melody in that scene, I'm telling you, it has carried more weight for me since I saw the movie than it ever had before. Obviously, I thought it was a fantastic performance, but the way Tom Parker sets it up by saying, the last time I saw Elvis perform, and he does the kind of setup to show you he could still do it when he needed to do it. And it adds to the tragedy even more. And that's when I broke. Like, I broke and just started crying. So just fantastic stuff. So I give this film 4 cowboy hats out of 5 cowboy hats. It is so excellent. Yes, some of the stuff they don't tackle deeply enough that keeps it from being a 4.5 or a 5 cowboy hat movie. That's only Top Gun Maverick, ladies and gentlemen. But 4 cowboy hats, definitely. It is one that holds up to multiple rewatches. I've seen it twice now. I will definitely go back and see it again. I want to see it in Screen X, so the whole thing almost feels at times like a concert in certain moments. I want to go and see it that way. But I highly recommend this movie to you. Go and enjoy this. Don't go in thinking, oh, he's going to give me the full story of Elvis Presley. You're going to get a lot of the story of Elvis Presley. But as I said, not a straight down the line biopic. It's a little more stylized, but you'll get the general gist of Elvis Presley, and you'll get a little more in-depth on Elvis Presley as well. And I think the film does an excellent job of that. This is Baz Luhrmann's best movie since, I think, William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, in my opinion. I think it's his best movie since then, and he deserves all kinds of credit for it. And Austin Butler is a dynamo, an absolute electric dynamo. I will not be surprised if they say his name for Best Actor nominations. I will not be surprised. I said that in my out-of-theater reaction. I still maintain that now. I won't be surprised, say, Baz Luhrmann for Best Director and this film for Best Picture in terms of nominations. Will they win? I don't know. But right now, I would absolutely put all 3 of them in my nominations pile for those categories for sure. And I think that a lot of you will feel that way as well. I know you've seen it already. If you're watching the spoiler review, if you haven't seen it and you're watching the spoiler review, then God love you. Thanks so much for watching. But when you go see it for the first time, I want to hear from you if you think it belongs as a possible nominee in those categories. All right, that's my spoiler review here for Elvis, the movie from Baz Luhrmann. Thanks so much for watching this video. I appreciate it madly. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel down below. Hit that bell button. Also, follow me on Twitch, the Outlaw Nation, all one word. And come and hang out with us on the Patreon. Support us there, patreon.com/John Rocha. See all the multiple tiers and the benefits that you can be a part of as well. All right, as the king once said, TCB, baby, taking care of business. I hope I took care of business on this review, and I'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review here on the Outlaw Nation.